She had exactly 3 rules for working for a man like Koss, and she had written them in the back of her first work notebook the morning she took the job. Rule 1, do not mistake his stillness for safety. Rule 2, do not let him see you rattled. Rule 3, do not under any circumstances forget what he is. 3 years later, Hana kept all 3. She kept them the way you keep a splinter you've stopped trying to dig out, aware of it constantly, working around the small, persistent ache of it, never quite forgetting it's there. Her desk sat outside Koss's office on the 14th floor of a glass tower in the financial district, a building that smelled of corporate cleaning solution and housed in its lower floors a legitimate import consulting firm that filed clean tax returns every April. The upper floors were a different matter. Hana did not manage the upper floors. She managed the numbers that made the lower floors look like they deserved to exist. Shell companies, trust accounts, disbursements routed through holding vehicles she had built herself, layered deep enough that a forensic accountant could spend 6 months climbing through them and still not reach the bottom. She was very good at her job. Koss had found her in the bankruptcy proceedings of her previous employer, a mid-tier logistics company that had cooked its own books and imploded in spectacular fashion, taking 11 years of her career and 4 months of unpaid wages with it. She had been sitting in a hallway outside a creditors' meeting, going through the liquidation schedules on her laptop, with the focused calm of someone who had nothing left to lose, when a man in a grey suit had placed a card on the edge of her screen without a word, no introduction, no pitch, just the card, and then he was gone. The card had one name on it, Koss. She had done her research. She had found enough to understand what the job would be, and not quite enough to know why she said yes anyway. Probably the unpaid wages. Probably the fact that her landlord had already left 2 voicemails. Probably the small, specific exhaustion of being a woman who was very good with numbers and had spent 15 years watching men in better suits take credit for her thinking. Koss paid well. Koss paid on time. And Koss, she learned quickly, respected competence the way other people respected almost nothing else. He was not warm. He was not what anyone would call kind. He was 42 years old with a scar that started behind his left ear and disappeared under the collar of his shirt, and he ran his operation with the cold, meticulous precision of a man who had learned to survive by being the most patient person in any room. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He spoke in margins and percentages, in the language of what things cost versus what they were worth, and Hana spoke the same language, and that was perhaps the entire foundation of why the arrangement had held. She was useful to him. She understood that clearly. She had never made the mistake of calling it anything else. On a Thursday in late October, she left the office at 5:45. This was unusual. Hana did not, as a rule, leave at 5:45. She left when the work was done, and the work was never done by 5:45. But she had reorganized her week deliberately, front-loading 3 days of reconciliations, setting up the automated routing for the month-end transfers, briefing the junior analyst on the morning wire protocols, so nothing would fall apart in her absence. She set her out of office. She closed her laptop. She put on her coat. Koss was on a call when she stopped at his door. He held up 2 fingers without turning around, standing at the window the way he always did when something was bothering him, staring out at the lake, which spread grey and wide beneath a sky that hadn't decided on itself. She waited. When he hung up, he looked at her in the doorway. "I'm leaving," she said. Something moved across his face. Not surprise exactly, but something adjacent to it, like a man who had looked up to find the furniture rearranged. "The Meridian Street accounts," he said. "Reconciled. The memo is on your shared drive, tabbed and indexed. The consolidated report for Friday is drafted and sitting in review. There's nothing that can't wait until morning." She pulled on her gloves. He looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Koss had a way of looking at people that felt like calculation. Like he was running the numbers on you, assessing your current value against projected risk. "Personal appointment," he said. "Not a question. Something else. something she didn't examine. "Yes," she said. She did not explain. Explanations invited to negotiation, and she did not intend to negotiate. She said good night and she left, and she did not turn back to see how long he stood there before he moved. The restaurant was small and Italian, on a side street in the annex neighborhood, the kind of place with mismatched wine glasses and a handwritten menu that changed weekly. Paul Whelan was already there when she arrived, rising from his chair when he saw her come through the door, because he was the kind of man who stood when someone arrived. She had noticed that the first time they'd met, 6 weeks earlier at a coffee counter near her office, when he'd held the door for the woman behind him without even thinking about it. He was a structural engineer. He coached a recreational hockey team on Sunday mornings. He had a reasonable laugh and no visible ulterior motive, which was so unfamiliar a combination that Hana had stood in her kitchen for 10 minutes before texting him back the first time, trying to figure out what she was actually afraid of. The evening was good, genuinely good, in a way she hadn't let herself expect. Paul listened when she talked and didn't redirect the conversation back to himself, and the food was excellent, and by 9 o'clock she was walking back through the cool October air to her car, thinking carefully about whether she might want to do this again. She did not see the black SUV idling half a block behind her. She was not meant to. The following Monday, everything at the office was exactly as it always was. Koss was in his chair by 7:15. The morning briefing ran on schedule. He signed 3 documents without comment and sent her a list of amendments to the Meridian Street holding structure via encrypted message at 8:10, which meant he'd been thinking about it over the weekend. He did not mention Thursday. Normal. It stayed normal through Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, Paul texted her to say there had been a problem at work. A regulatory flag that had appeared out of nowhere, an external audit triggered by an anonymous complaint. He was sorry. Could they push their Friday dinner? He'd explain more when he knew more. Hana replied that it was fine. Take care of what you need to. She thought nothing more of it. On Thursday afternoon, he texted again. The flag had turned into something worse. A compliance issue. His firm's senior partner was discussing liability. Paul's name was now attached to a risk assessment filing he had not submitted, bearing a digital signature he had not made. Hana read the message in the break room with a cup of tea she did not drink. She was a woman who dealt in paper trails for a living. She knew what a manufactured compliance issue looked like. She knew how signatures got attached to documents without people's knowledge. She knew how regulatory flags got planted and how they propagated, and exactly how much damage they could do before anyone traced the source. She stood very still for a moment. Then she went back to her desk. She pulled up the billing portal for the law firm Koss, retained for corporate restructuring, a task she performed every 2 weeks, cross-referencing billables against the legitimate operating budget. She went through it page by page the way she always did, slowly, carefully, the way her mother had always told her she was too careful about everything. She found it on page 11. Whelan Regulatory Interference, Document Authentication, Third-Party Record Amendment. Client, Meridian Street Holdings LLC. The billing date was the Friday morning after her dinner in the annex. Hana looked at the entry on her screen. She read it twice. Then she opened 3 more tabs and started pulling threads. It took her 45 minutes to build the complete picture. It was technically elegant work, which made it worse rather than better. The regulatory flag had been introduced through an anonymous complaint to the provincial oversight body, the kind the body was legally required to act on, regardless of source. The document bearing Paul's signature had been fed through a third-party records management firm that Koss's operation used for legitimate file handling, which created clean deniability in the architecture. The authentication work would have taken perhaps 6 hours for someone with access to the right tools. Koss's legal team had access to all of them. One dinner, a man had listened to her talk about her week and then touched her hand across a table, and within 48 hours Koss had done all of this. Hana closed every tab. She opened the small black notebook she kept for hard copies, the one she had never let anyone else touch. She wrote down the file references, the billing codes, the name of the partner who had billed the hours, the time-stamped metadata from the records management system. She dated the entry. She closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer. She took a long, quiet breath. She texted Paul Whelan, "I may know what's happening with your compliance issue. I can't fully explain it, but if you trust me, I can get it reversed. I'm sorry." He didn't reply for 2 hours. When he did, "I trust you. What do I need to do?" She told him to do nothing, to sit tight. Then she stood up, straightened her jacket, and walked across the floor to Koss's office door. She knocked. She had never knocked before in 3 years. She knocked now because this was a different kind of conversation, and she wanted him to understand that before she even stepped inside. "Come," he said. He was at the window again. The city below him was doing its late afternoon thing, traffic bleeding red across the wet streets, the lake a flat pewter line in the distance. He didn't turn when she entered. "The Bauer Amendment." "Paul Whelan," Hana said. Silence. Koss turned slowly. He was very good at keeping his face still. He had spent decades making it a discipline, but she had been reading him for 3 years, and she could see the specific quality of the stillness now. Not blankness, but recognition. The stillness of a man who has been found out and is calculating his next move. "Is there something you'd like to explain to me?" Her voice was completely level. It cost her something to keep it that way, but it was level. He crossed to his desk and sat down, settling in for a difficult conversation, approaching it like a negotiation. That told her a great deal. "He wasn't right for you," Koss said finally. The sheer, unexamined certainty of it, the arrogance built into every syllable, sent something white and hot moving through her chest. "You don't know him," she said. "I know enough. You had a man's professional record falsified. She took a step forward. You attached his name to a filing he didn't make. That is a career-ending charge, if it's not unwound. That is potentially criminal depending on how the oversight body proceeds. It won't get that far. That is not the point." The warmth in her voice was gone now, all the way down to the subfloor. "You did this because I had dinner with someone, because a man was kind to me in a restaurant, and you decided there should be consequences for it. Tell me I've misread the situation." Koss looked at the surface of his desk. The muscle in his jaw moved once. "You haven't," he said. The admission sat between them, like something that had fallen from a great height. "Fix it," Hana said. "All of it. The regulatory flag, the document, the compliance issue. I want all of it reversed by end of business tomorrow, and I want written confirmation." He looked up at her. She had seen every version of Koss's face over 3 years. The cold version, the calculating version, the very rare version that appeared when something had gone genuinely wrong. She had never seen what was on his face now, something underneath the calculated stillness, something undefended and exposed. It made him look like an ordinary person. It made him look like a man who had just fully understood the scale of what he'd done. "And then," he said quietly, "and then I'll decide whether I come back on Monday." She left. She did not slam the door. She pulled it firmly shut behind her, which was worse, and she went back to her desk and sat down and stared at her screen and breathed. In, 4 counts. Out, 4 counts. A technique she had learned in a very different kind of difficult situation a long time ago, in a life that felt like it belonged to someone else now. She heard nothing from him for the rest of the afternoon. At 5:47, her encrypted phone buzzed. "The regulatory body has been contacted. The flag is being withdrawn. Erroneous filing on the reporting body's end, administrative correction. Whelan's record will be clean by tomorrow morning. The document has been recalled and the authentication trail destroyed. There is no paper trail connecting this office to him." She read it. She waited. A second message. "His firm's senior partner will receive a referral tomorrow morning, a substantial commercial liability contract, enough to more than offset any damage to Whelan's standing internally. He will present it himself. He'll be fine. A third, after a pause, you have my word. Hana set the phone face down on the desk. She sat there for a while in the quiet hum of the empty floor, thinking about a lot of things. She thought about Paul Whelan, who had stood up when she walked through the door and listened without interrupting and texted her, "I trust you," without asking why. She thought about the HR director at a downtown consulting firm she'd met for coffee 3 weeks ago. A contact, a soft exit strategy, the kind of sensible next step that a person in her position probably should have been building more deliberately. She thought about what it would feel like to sit in a clean office where the biggest problem of the day was a missed deadline on a quarterly performance review. She went home. She made dinner standing at her kitchen counter. Her cat knocked a pen off the edge and looked at her as though she'd done it. On Saturday, she texted Paul. "The issue is resolved. I can't explain it fully, but it's done. I'm sorry it happened. I think, for your own sake, you should delete my number." He replied, "Did your boss do this?" She looked at her phone for a long time. "Yes," she wrote. "Are you okay?" She appreciated that. She appreciated that his first question was about her and not about what had been done to him. "I will be. Take care of yourself, Paul." His last message, "You deserve something easy, Hana. I genuinely hope you find it." She put the phone face down on the counter and stood there with her hand flat against the cold kitchen tile, feeling the chill of it spread up through her palm. The thing about Koss was that she had always known what he was. She had known it from the card, placed on the edge of her laptop screen. From the first morning she had walked into that glass tower and understood what the numbers she was being asked to manage actually represented. She had stayed anyway, not from naivety, not from blindness, but because she had needed the work, and because she was genuinely exceptionally good at it, and because there was a specific, rare form of respect in the way he treated her competence that she had not found anywhere else. He had never once talked over her, never taken credit for her work, never sent her for coffee or assumed that a woman in her role was decorative rather than functional. She had always known it was complicated. She had not known, until this week, exactly how complicated. Paul's message sat on her screen. "You deserve something easy." He wasn't wrong. She probably did. She also knew with the same clean precision she brought to balance sheets. That easy was not the same as right, and right was not the same as safe, and safe was not the same as being fully awake inside your own life, and she had only ever felt completely awake when the stakes were real. She was thinking about all of that on Saturday afternoon when her personal phone rang. Not the encrypted work phone, the personal one with the cracked corner she'd never bothered to fix. Koss's number. He had never called this phone. He had the number, she'd given it to him for genuine emergencies 3 years ago, and he had never once used it. She let it ring 4 times. Then she answered. "Yes," she said. A pause. She could hear the city on his end, traffic, the hollow acoustic of somewhere outdoors, wind cutting across the receiver. "I owe you an explanation," Koss said. "Not a justification, I don't have one, an explanation." "You don't owe me anything." "That isn't true." He was quiet a moment. "You've been with me 3 years. In that time you've kept this operation functional at least 4 times when it should have collapsed under its own weight. You know more about this business than most of my senior people, and you have never once misused that. You've never threatened me with it, never leveraged it, never asked for anything beyond your salary and reasonable professional conditions." Another pause, longer. "I treated you like an asset. I don't mean that as a compliment. I categorized you incorrectly, and when I saw you at that restaurant I responded to it the way I respond to threats against things I can't afford to lose. That's not what you are." Hana sat down on her sofa. Her cat climbed onto the cushion next to her and began kneading her leg with complete indifference to the weight of the conversation. "What am I, then?" she asked. The silence ran long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. "I don't have the right word for it," he said finally. "I know what I did was wrong. I know you were right to leave. I know I fixed it. Whelan is fine, his record is clean. The referral went through this morning, his senior partner put him on the file himself, but fixing it after the fact doesn't make the doing of it acceptable. I understand that. Hana stroked her cat's ears and thought about rule number 3. Do not, under any circumstances, forget what he is. She had not forgotten. She was not forgetting now. She was holding it clearly in both hands, looking at it directly, and making a decision with full information. That was different from forgetting. I'll be in Monday, she said. Silence. Hana, I'm not coming back because you fixed it, she said. I want to be precise about that. You should have fixed it regardless. I'm coming back because I'm choosing to, and because I want certain things to change, and I need you to understand that those are 2 separate statements. What things? Not quite a question. His voice was careful. We are going to have a clear conversation about what I am and am not in this organization and in your life, and we are going to formalize it. A pause. Formalize. In writing. You understand contracts. So do I. She looked out her window at the grey October street, a woman walking a dog below, a cyclist moving through the intersection, the ordinary city, entirely unconcerned. We'll write one. Another silence, the longest yet. All right, Koss said. Monday, 8 o'clock, have coffee ready. You make the coffee. Not anymore. She hung up before he could respond. She sat for a while with the phone in her lap, the cat loud and self-satisfied against her side, the city making its usual Saturday sounds outside. Traffic, someone's music from a window above, a sound she couldn't identify that might have been laughter. She had told Paul Whelan she deserved something easy. She believed that was true. She also believed with the same part of her brain that had kept her alive and employed and unindicted for 3 years in a world that offered none of those things lightly, that she had never once been drawn to easy. Not jobs, not decisions, not the kind of problems that resolved themselves neatly. She had grown up watching her mother make herself smaller and smaller to fit inside a life someone else had designed. And at 16 she had promised herself that was not how her story would go. She had walked into a room full of dangerous men and become the most necessary person in it, not by making herself palatable, not by being small, but by being so precisely useful that removing her would cost more than keeping her. She had done that herself. No one had handed it to her. That was not a cage. That was a position she had built and occupied on her own terms. The difference mattered. She knew the difference. She was staking something real on knowing the difference. She opened her notebook on Saturday evening and wrote a new set of rules. 5 of them this time. She underlined 3. She thought about a 6th, decided against it, and closed the notebook. Monday, 8 o'clock. She would find out what the next chapter looked like. She would find out if Koss was capable of understanding that the version of her he wanted. The one who stood her ground and never blinked and ran his empire without apology, could not exist inside a life where he made her choices for her. That the thing he admired and the thing he had tried to do were flatly incompatible, and that if he was as intelligent as she had always believed him to be, he would figure that out quickly. And if he didn't, she had the notebook. She had always had the notebook. She had always had the door. Hana had never made the mistake of thinking she understood Koss, but she was starting to think that he had never truly understood her either. Not fully, not past the layer of her usefulness, and that this, for the first time in 3 years, felt like something worth correcting. Not because she owed him the effort. Because she was choosing to make it. There is a particular kind of power that no one tells you about when you're young and broke and learning to survive. The power that lives in the person who decides to stay. Not because they have to, but because leaving would cost them something real. Hana had built her whole adult life around that distinction. She simply hadn't known until now that Koss was part of what she would lose. Some women walk away and find something easier. Some women stand in the fire and renegotiate the terms. Hana already knew which one she was. She always had.